Time for another segment of the Curator's Corner. I'm here in studio with Jim Sapika, Director of the National Firearms Museum, located at NRA headquarters in Fairfax, Virginia. Jim, thank you for being with us again this week. And we started last week with part one of a two-part Curator's Corner series, if you will, on handgun design evolution, and particular handguns, and particular feature of those handguns that were pivotal to the design of handguns. We started last week with a Colt Patterson. Now we're going to move on to the Smith & Wesson Model 1.
Exactly.
The first one.
Exactly.
I'm excited to hear about this one, Jim.
Well, these are both new acquisitions to the museum. They're both very pivotal models, so we're very happy to have them. As we discussed last week, the Colt Patterson represented the first effective repeating firearm. It also represented the beginning of the Colt Firearms Company. This little Smith & Wesson Model 1 represented the beginning of the Smith & Wesson company. Just like Colt, Smith & Wesson had two different startups. The first one was unsuccessful, the second one was successful. The first one was a lever action repeating pistol, which didn't really catch on for them, so they sold the design to a shirt manufacturer and went out of business. The shirt manufacturer was Oliver Winchester, and he put the lever action to good use.
Wow.
So that design didn't go to waste.
And soon stopped making shirts.
That's
and started
right.
making firearms.
That's right, exactly. But just as the Colt Patterson represented the first effective repeating firearm, the Smith & Wesson breakthrough was the effective use of self-contained metallic cartridges. For the Patterson and the percussion revolvers, to load it, you had loose powder, you had a lead ball that had to be rammed home, you had to put a percussion cap on each of the nipples on the cylinder. It was subject to moisture, very fumbly to load, very inconvenient. You had your 5 or 6 shots quick, but reloading was quite a process.
And literally keeping your powder dry meant something. If the powder was wet, you're sunk. You're done.
What Daniel Wesson did was adapt the revolver design to self-contained metallic cartridges. And the little cartridge that Daniel Wesson developed is still in use today. It's basically the same as the 22 short. Wow. It's a little rimfire cartridge. And this was the first Smith & Wesson. It looks odd to us today, but it's a 7-shot, single-action, 22 rimfire revolver. It's what we call a tip-up revolver, which means that the barrel tips up and the cylinder removes for loading and unloading. You punch out the empty casings using that ejector stud. So you eject that way, and then it's a little tricky to reassemble. You have to get it precisely on the little stud on the rotating recoil shield, but then you're ready for 7 more. It's a spur trigger. The projections on the frame shield the trigger itself. When the hammer is cocked, the trigger comes forward just enough to be fired by pulling the trigger and releasing the hammer. So it looks odd to us, but that's where Smith & Wesson started. And this came in the late 1850s, right before the Civil War. And this revolver, while never an issue revolver, was very popular as a private purchase and presentation revolver during the Civil War.
And I was going to ask you, who would carry a firearm like that? And you kind of answered my question, but please, I mean, it would.
Well, it was a lot of soldiers in the Civil War had Smith & Wesson. They came out with what they called a Model 2 right at the beginning of the Civil War, which was a little bit bigger, 32 caliber, a little more effective. But this could be used by anyone. It could be a gentleman's pocket gun. It could be a lady's muff pistol. Just the handiness of the self-contained cartridges made it very popular right away.
And last week, talking about the Patterson, we talked about the big evolution there was the cylinder.
Yes.
Now this is equally, I don't want to put you on the spot, Jim, but what do you think I have to say the self-contained cartridge had to be such a huge innovation.
It's really huge. They both were very significant, but you know, Colt certainly laid the groundwork for the modern firearm, but I think arguably the little Smith & Wesson, this odd little spur trigger, is the granddaddy of all modern handguns.
And the neatest thing about looking at these firearms, you mentioned before with the Patterson, it was from the area where they were from, and this is the Model 1. It's like neat seeing, it's almost like talking about the Model T. These are the Model Ts, if you would. This is the original, the groundbreaking models that these guys came out with, these famous manufacturers.
Indeed they are, and speaking of where they're from, This one gets even more interesting, and it's one of the reasons that we acquired this particular piece. We don't buy a lot of firearms for the museum. The vast majority of them are donated. This particular one we reached out and bought, and that is the inscription on the gun.
I noticed that before. I couldn't read it, but please
yeah.
tell us.
I mentioned that a number of these were private purchase for various officers in the Civil War, usually on the Union side. This one is inscribed to Lieutenant Colonel H.D. Townsend of the 1st Cavalry on this side. On the other side, it says Mad Harry at the Fairfax County Courthouse.
Wow.
And it's inscribed June 15th, 1861, which was just days before the first Battle of Bull Run.
Wow.
So we don't know who Mad Harry was, but he was somebody. And on the butt is inscribed Charlotte. So it's possibly a gift from a wife or a sweetheart.
Wow, how neat is that?
But it has the local history. Of course, we're located in Fairfax, Virginia, at the NRA headquarters. And it's just a wonderful little piece. It has the design significance. It has the beginning of the Smith & Wesson Company, and it has that wonderful Civil War inscription right from this area.
Wow, that is very neat. Now, you did mention Fairfax, so tell folks where the National Firearms Museum is, how they can see that, if they can get to the area, and how they can see it online.
We're located at the NRA headquarters at 11250 Waples Mill Road in Fairfax, Virginia. And we are open every day of the year except major holidays. We're open from 9:30 in the morning till 5, and Saturdays we stay late until 7. There's never an admission charge. Folks are welcome to come in. We've got a nice museum store there. We've got about a 5,000 gun collection. About half of those are on display in wonderful galleries that tell the story of Americans and their firearms throughout history, both the firearms themselves and the significance in American daily life and protecting our collective freedom and preserving our individual rights. We're very proud of the museum. It's a great place to visit. We're in the middle of a really exciting website project. We're totally updating the website. We hope to have pictures of every gun in the museum available on the website within about 5 or 6 months. But this will be a tremendous leap forward, so we hope folks will visit that in a few months at www.nationalfirearmsmuseum.org, because it will be a very cool website.
But when you do come to the area to see Bull Run, to see the historic places around in Fairfax, Old Town Fairfax, full of historic places, get there to the National Firearms Museum when you're in the D.C. area, because it is the premier firearms museum.